Attention, citizens of Lion's Arch. Zomeros of the Mystic Forge is willing to transform your common items into powerful ones.
Louder, and call me the mighty Zomeros.
In your dreams, Zomeros.
Djinn are spirits with deep ties to the Elonian continent, usually bound to spiritually strong areas. In some Elonian legends, they have the power to act unseen. Like humans, they're allegedly capable of choosing a path of good or evil. In a sense, Djinn really can act unseen. Many are shapeshifters, capable of assuming a human form when interacting with human beings and other species. Some Vabian myths describe the Djinn as protectors of the natural world, making them enemies of unnatural demons from other dimensions. Most Djinn are bound to the locations and places they protect, most commonly rivers, lakes, and stretches of desert. When humans first came to Elona, truly powerful wizards attempted to bind Djinn to estates, caves, vaults, or other places where wealth was hidden. Djinn guardians who outlive their masters may forget their original commands, or they may become powerful enough to find their own motives. Djinn are relentless when defending the items, places, and causes they protect, but they may also bestow their favour upon people who aid them in those tasks. Vabian legends hint at Djinn granting them wishes and bestowing powers. In more recent accounts, adventurers have shared stories of Djinn who offered them magical knowledge and powerful magical items, including some salvaged from the mighty heroes who dared to disturb the Djinn. A quote from the Guild Wars Nightfall physical manuscripts. Well, hello there. Today I'm going to be talking at long last about the Mythwright Gambit new Wing 6 raid story, and it's a pretty cool thing for us to be recapping story on, since it really is a big tangent to the rest of the stuff that happened in the game. This is obviously the 6th wing, but the story doesn't really tie into anything to do with the Forsaken Thicket, to do with the Bastion of the Penitent, to do with the Hall of Chains in Underworld we had very recently with Path of Fire, nor really much of the expansion and Living World story. It really does kind of exist on its own, at least for now, because there's a big cliffhanger. So there's a ton to get through. The devs really went above and beyond with extra information on this, mostly due to the fact there are some really meaty tomes of lore. So yeah, let's jump on in. I'll give you some preamble detail first, so that we're all on the same page and we know exactly what the situation is when this release began. So we're here in Lion's Arch for a very important reason, because Lion's Arch is host to this thing, the Mystic Forge. It's had various appearances throughout the years. It's been in the Vigil Keep before. In old Lion's Arch it looked a bit different, but in general it's a game feature where you can throw items in, get items out, sometimes on random chance, sometimes guaranteed, and indeed most of the most exotic, powerful, wonderful weapons in the entire game, the legendaries, all come from the Forge. As the years have gone on, the devs have continued to add hints that the Djinn within the Forge actually has been collecting enormous amounts of weapons and gold over the years, and now may have amassed quite an impressive arsenal. In fact, I think if you stand around long enough, this Asura and this human here actually openly speculate about it.
Pay dirt! Oh, finally, the lair of Zomeros. Oh, fascinating. So many piles of archaeologically significant things.
But we've never really known much about how the Forge works, what the Djinn on the inside of the Forge does, why he does it, who he favors or how. These have all been kind of fun, silly questions that never really needed answers, but with this raid release, the devs decided to. They allow us this time to go inside the Forge, and that's where we'll be spending the majority of this video. I will note as well that Zomeros has always had this lovely companion here known as Miani. She's an Elonian that has given us basic gameplay detail about how the Forge is utilized by the player base, and small amounts of backstory, expressing herself to be a companion of Zomeros's for many times, longing to have seen her homeland of Elona, even since 2012, before the Path of Fire expansion actually released. But beyond that, we really didn't get much from her in the past. Miani doesn't have much to do with this raid either, as she stays Tyria topside when we go inside. You may also remember a little while ago with current events, these being the small updates that get dropped into the game between the large Living World releases, the devs added a curious story to do called the Shadow Stone to deal with all number of weird magical anomaly things. Oddly enough, when that current event story came in, it did interact with the Mystic Forge in a weird way. So if you try and walk in it on Tyria, it will spit you out. But if you stand really close, you actually become an anomaly, as you can see here, as the magic affects you. So will the raid release talk about this? When the current events thing came out, I believe, depending on which decision you made in that story step, what buffs you have on and stuff, it actually changes the kind of anomaly you'll be when standing in the Forge. So were the devs looking to explain that now? I guess we'll see. Loading in on the patch, this time we do get a mail, and it's from Scholar Glenna. A mystic ticket list. This is a weird one, so bear with me. I just received a personal invitation for me and those wonderful adventurers I always seem to be traveling around with to tour the interior of the Mystic Forge. The Mystic Forge! The source of Tyria's most legendary weapons and armor. The Priory's never been granted permission to see how it works, so this could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us. Scholar Glenna, of course, being with the Priory and seeking to learn as much as she can about the world. There's no precedent for the Mystic Forge in Guild Wars 1 either, for what it's worth, so it truly is uncharted territory. It could also just be a scam, she says. Even though the letter is signed by Zomeros himself, something about this feels fishy to me. I don't know what goes on inside the Mystic Forge, but I'll be ready for anything. And when we click Show Me, the game will say Zomeros has invited you to participate in the very first private tour of the Mystic Forge, witness the incredible inner workings of the Djinn's magical domain, and uncover the dark secret that lurks at its center. So, we get to go inside. Now, you guys may have noticed with the other raid releases, they'll add some entrance to it in the actual open world. So for Heart of Thorns, the first wing we ever had, you could walk up north and then you'd actually be there. For Bastion of the Penitent, there was a mysterious portal in Bloodstone Fen that would take you there. For the Underworld, there's a portal at the Grenth statue in Lorna's Pass, just like there was in Guild Wars 1. What about for this release? Well, there is no portal at the Mystic Forge. The devs believing basically that it would be a bit silly to have all the players standing around doing their banking, all the players standing around doing the trading posting, and also the Mystic Forge entrance to the raid. So instead, we only get to it from the aerodrome. There's really not too much interesting there, but we will go there in a second. So, that's not all though. With the mail, Miani's dialogue did update too. So we can ask her how does the Forge work, and she'll give us that general gameplay information. We can say, what do you do for Zomeros? And she says, I mostly listen to him yammer on about random topics. I also manage business between the Forge and its customers. So one other thing you should understand about Zomeros before this wing starts is Miani talks about how he's always talking. And whenever we get an item out of the Forge, the idea is, oh, Zomeros didn't favour you this time, but this time he did. He's like this eclectic, weird, strange character that we can't discern his true motivations. But we never actually hear him speak. Funnily enough, it was data mined a while ago by the community's That Shaman that there were, once upon a time, intended to be fully voice-acted conversations between Miani and Zomeros firing away here in the Mystic Forge. Here's a little sample of some of the stuff you could hear.
We should explore this new land.
Why should I explore when the greatest heroes of this age bring me gifts to craft into items of power?
Don't you miss exploring?
I make my home in this forge. I am content.
Pretty freaking cool, right? And so that's what his voice sounded like. And I guess, though we as players never got that content implemented in the end, maybe the devs felt that the voice cues would trigger too much. I guess the sense is that the Tyrians, as a function of world building and lore, do still have that experience. But you'll notice Miani also has some new dialogue here now. And she says, we can ask her, why would Zomeros invite us into the Mystic Forge? And she says, honestly, I have no idea. Up until now, he's been very secretive about how the Forge works. Something's changed. Changed how? Ever since he sent out that invitation, he's been acting strange. He's more outgoing, friendly. Very suspicious, because he seemed to be very selfishly minded before. Well, what else can you tell me about Zomeros? He came here from Ilona a long time ago. He says it was voluntary, but I doubt it. So this isn't technically new, Miani explaining that he came here from Ilona a long time ago, because as a genie, as a Djinn, we're well aware that they are native to that area of the world, and indeed, having played the most recent Path of Fire expansion, you guys will have interacted with a lot of Djinn, even from the earliest points right in the first map if you go to some higher mastery level areas. You also, of course, have the fact that they are resisting the brand in the Domain of Abbey, and the new map, having a lot of brand as well, deals with Djinn too. More on that in a second. But Zomeros is here for some reason. Was it voluntary? We doubt it. Guild Wars 1 established that Djinn were bound to places or objects, and the idea being perhaps that Zomeros for some reason is bound to the Mystic Forge. You think Zomeros was forced to leave Alona, we ask? And she says he likes to gamble and make bets. It's got him in trouble more than once. This idea that he likes to gamble and make bets is new as of this raid release. At least I'm pretty sure it is. And it's a funny thing that the devs are doing there I really quite like, because we as players are gambling and making bets if we're rolling items into the forge, trying to get precursors and stuff out. So it's nice to suggest that the thing responsible for our luck suffers from the same vice. So, that's not all. We are about to go into the release via the aerodrome, but would you believe it, even in the new map, the devs do actually talk about the raid. So let's head on down to the Jahai Bluffs that was just released. There will not be spoilers for the main story here, but I want to show you guys a very specific temple to the south of the map, the Cordonor Temple. So this here is the Cordonor Temple, and here we can find a lot of Djinn. The Djinn talk about a variety of different topics, including triggering some pretty prominent events for some of the collections in this release, discussing how they can sometimes resist the brand, how they don't care about humans, and kind of have their own fairs going on. The brand in general in this release, both through the raid you're about to watch and out here in the open world, seem really badass, really magical, really indifferent to the activities of humans. But what's really cool about this place is the guy at the bounty board, who on occasion will speak out loud about the raids. He openly says that Zomeros and a character called Kadim seem to be in some kind of conflict. Kadim being a name we've never heard before, neither in Guild Wars 1 or 2. We can also speak to the bounty hunter guy, and he'll give us further details, saying some kind of dust up in the Mystic Forge has released strange and terrible creatures into Alona. Can you help me? Just pick a target. So the idea of many of the bounties when Path of Fire first came out was that leyline magic was causing things to become enraged and they needed to be dealt with. On this map, the devs went with a different tack and suggested that these things...
Eric asked heroes to fight an elemental hydra, a sand lion, and a forged brutalizer. Doran's responsible for a harpy matriarch, a ghost captain, and a tar elemental. And me? I get the pet rock. Gods, why?
It's suggesting that these things on the board here, the Etin, the Patriarch, the Pet Rock, are actually from the Mystic Forge. Which is strange. We've collected minis out of the Mystic Forge in the past, but they've always been decidedly explained in lore as mechanical creations. Zomeros only gives us items. Why would creatures be coming out of the Forge? Well, that's one of the mysteries that's about to be answered. We can also say what's going on, and he says, Kadim and Zomeros are sorting out their differences. You know Djinn, powerful, temperamental, with a penchant for collecting exotic creatures and then smashing their cages. Do they? Well, we know that Zomeros is a collector of sorts. He collects tons of items, but creatures? I'm not sure I understand. Me neither. I'm just clean up. You'll have to talk to the authorities at the Lion's Arch Aerodrome for more information. So, that's basically all the exposition before the raid. The aerodrome has updated with this release. There's even some new NPCs you can't speak to here, but a new door is available. While the other doors, the idea is we go deeper into the aerodrome and fly on airships to each wing. This one is slightly different. You'll notice that mercenaries are coming out of it. There's tons of gold everywhere and a script on the outside. We've never until this release heard of Skrit in association with the Mystic Forge, but now all will become clear, guys. A Mystic Forge greeter says, "You're here for a tour? Mystic Forge is a wonderful place filled with shinies of all sorts. Does this lead to the Mystic Forge? Yes, this takes you right to the Mystic Forge. Go right on in." And we can say thank you, and this will leave us inside. We get the same flavor text we read on the world map a moment ago, and we get to figure out what is happening with Zomeros in the Mythwright Gambit. Let's do it. And so we fall inside. Beautiful. Now, the first time you ever do this on your account, you will actually fall from above, which if we look up there, you can actually see what appears to be the Mystic Forge there, or some kind of swirling portal vortex a bit like it, and I guess that's where we came from. Interestingly, on the Path of Fire event to do with the lair of Zomeros, his original home, if you will, maybe before he went created or bound himself to the Forge, as we are now curious, there was a similar thing on the ceiling. It looked like the Forge up there. So, essentially what seems to have happened here, guys, is we have entered a pocket dimension. Many players have speculated we're actually in Crater, just because the game engine makes it look like we are, but that's just the way that the game functions, and I'm pretty sure the idea is we're in a little pocket universe. Already a really profound thing in the lore that we haven't really dived into or discussed much in the franchise so far. So, here we are. You'll notice straight away tons of script running around, and indeed, this is the idea. We saw one on the outside. Script appear to be helping Zomeros from within, and that makes sense because they have mountains of junk and shinies. You can see all the items being dedicated and donated by the player base as they fall down, and one of the common items you often get out of the Forge, pearl items, litter the floor everywhere down here. But it is truly a gorgeous, beautiful, open wing that I'm not going to keep drawing attention to. Just enjoy feasting your eyes as we travel through. Waiting ahead is Zomeros and Glenna, who have come ahead of us, and our objective is to talk to them to begin the tour.
Welcome, my friends, to the Mystic Forge. I am Zomeros, and this is my realm. Thank you all for accepting my invitation. There's just one tiny bit of red tape before we get started.
How well is he voice acted? So here he brings out a scroll, an epic length.
Paperwork, that's thorough.
Just the usual waiver, non-disclosure, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Glenna has to move forward and sign. Luckily, we don't.
Splendid! Great, good. Let's commence with a tour then.
That doesn't seem suspicious at all then, does it, guys? Follow Zomeros and enjoy the tour.
So, all the stuff that people throw down here, it just accumulates into piles?
Accumulates? What? No. It's meticulously organized by professionals.
Script.
Professional script. Anyway, there's a portal just up ahead that will take us to...
Well, we see a guy, a fire djinn called Kadim, appear out of a lamp.
That is a big, angry thing. So, Zomeros, I see you've chosen your representatives.
Your what?
Very well, I accept. 3 challenges to decide the true owner of your Mystic Forge, and the first stands before you.
This is a really weird tour.
There never was a tour.
Okay. And so, yeah, we get some more of that beautiful player dialogue firing, and the initial open, the encounter itself begins. This is where most players who don't enjoy raiding will unfortunately have to stop. So yes, it appears that Zomeros, just like we heard in the open world, is in some kind of conflict with another djinn, this guy called Kadim. Now, if we avoid the boss, we can actually sneakily go over to Kadim, who is blocking the way forward for our tour, which now no longer seems like it was a tour at all, but we've been manipulated into some contract environment here. So Kadim will speak to us. You see, he's a legendary, and his flavor text is that he's a collector of exotic specimens. So remember how we heard that monsters were coming out of the forge? And this guy has a lamp, and he just brought a monster out of the lamp? Well, maybe he's responsible for that. He says, well, what are you waiting for? Your first challenge awaits. And we say, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
That is hardly my problem. Now, begin the challenge.
And unfortunately, we are left without much more of a clue as what's going on. Though the irony of a djinn that captures other things in a lamp instead of itself is not lost on me. Maybe his backstory is that a human once upon a time did that to him, one of these powerful wizards we heard at the head of the video, and now he wants revenge or he's changed his mind. Who knows? Back at Zomeros and Glenna, you will actually find there's some extra dialogue. So, Glenna, unfortunately, doesn't speak too much during this wing. Her dialogue will mysteriously vanish shortly later, which is a shame interesting because the whole thing where there's loads of script in here, she as an Asura would probably be a bit offset by, and we even get a glimpse of it a minute ago on the bridge. But let's see what she says. She says, I knew this tour thing was all too good to be true. And we can simply propose, what if we just leave? We don't have to do this weird fight, right?
That's a very good question, Zamaros. Why should we help you?
Actually, the contract you signed
Oh, the contract!
says you and your friends are required to stay and help me until this business with Kadim is, rectified.
So they rely on this idea that we're bound by the contract. I quite respect that the writers never went into some really convoluted thing about how it's a magical contract that binds you, because in truth we really can just leave, but that's like the story justification. We're honoring the contract for now. At what threat, who knows. But that's what Glenna says here for the start. And she, of course, does then have all of her different vendor wares. The main thing story-wise you might want to look at here is the Alembic Apparatus. This object seems to have empty sockets at each of its points. The question is, what is meant to go into each of them? This continues the legendary ring story that we still can't quite build this release, but if you remember my coverage of the Hall of Chains before, we got a special ring, the Hateful Swirl, from it. Well, you get the Alembic Apparatus this time and continue along. Zomaros, who we can actually speak to here, his flavor text is Master of the Mystic Forge. So he definitely owns this place, he's in control, and this other guy seems to be wresting control from him. Here's what Zomaros says. I promise I'll explain, but not with that giant, whatever it is, threatening my forge. Do we buy his promise, guys? Well, we say I'd rather you explain everything right now.
With that giant monster looming overhead? Have you lost your mind? One thing at a time.
You'll notice at this point that not only is this a much more light-hearted wing than the others in terms of visually how it looks, the way that people are talking, the jokes, but also his voice actor has got that like lightness to him that I really enjoy. In fact, it is a different voice actor to we heard the proposed voice acting back in Lion's Arch that got cut from the game and never released in the end. But there you have it. So, fine, but you've got a lot of explaining to do. So, at this point, the devs would like us to fly over there and take out this creature, an amalgamation of all kinds of different things. Interestingly, this did come out of the lamp belonging to Kadim. So, it's not like it's various pieces of the forge that have been magically bound together. It's like a different thing, I guess. Or it's Kadim that's just sort of holding it in place, maybe with his fiery magic. We do have dialogue as the fight goes along. However, here's where this wing gets really special. Instead of battling, we can choose to explore. And down here, you've already seen it for a moment, near the water, is a book. So you guys will recall in the recent Living Worlds episodes, they have found a way to deliver proper lore book UI to us. So here it is, a leather-bound book called the Four Djinn. And unlike where in Living World and other places we've seen this, they've been quite small snippets. There's a lot of dialogue in each of these, and I really mean a lot. So I will read it out to you guys, and I will not interrupt the stories whatsoever until we get to the end. There's about 1,000 times I could interrupt, but in the spirit of keeping this video as short as possible, I won't. But these are great. So, check it out. There's so much we don't know about the Djinn. There's so much we don't know about Zomaros. Let's see what we can find out. The Four Djinn. A few days east of Amnoon, deep in that sea of sand, one would be lucky to find themselves faced with my predicament. A quartet of Djinn hovered in their way, arguing at length about the nature of their elemental leanings. I stood there for quite some time, listening to their grand debate, and realized with a hint of fascination that these Djinn had been arguing amongst themselves for months, never once breaking from their disagreement no matter the time of day, the weather, or passing company. Djinn, as I discovered, need not the sustenance required by the other living beings of Tyria. Their connection to the world through their representative element seemed to be all they needed to persist in life. Unfortunately, as was the case for most visitors to that desolate sea of sand, I was in need of direction and had not the energy nor the provisions to seek out another means of acquiring it. When I approached the Four Djinn, they paid me little heed. The one of flame barely acknowledged my presence, snorting something obscene before returning to his debate. The air Djinn ignored me entirely, looking through me as though I were made of naught but the element itself. The earth Djinn broke away from its train of thought for but a moment to stare me down, but it was the water Djinn that decided to offer voice to thought. Perhaps this one should decide. The Djinn waved one of its arms in my general direction. A neutral party to break this horrid stalemate. The other three finally stopped their arguing, all now staring at me from on high as one might evaluate a fly impeding on their breakfast. This one? The Fire Djinn's face wrinkled in disappointment. It's rather small, isn't it? How could it possibly know what's at stake? I think it's a novel idea, said the Air Djinn. But we must first explain the nature of this disagreement. There is no disagreement. The Earth Djinn was less than receptive, crossing both pairs of arms, doubly suspicious. You three have simply yet to accept that without the Earth beneath us, your elements are useless. The Water Djinn was resolute. Again, we get nowhere. But this one, this human, it lives on the Earth, drinks of the water, breathes of the air, and uses fire to banish the darkness of night. It finds uses in all of us. Perhaps so, said the Earth Djinn, unmoved. But again, without the Earth, it cannot breathe, it cannot drink, and it most certainly cannot banish the darkness. The other three Djinn had grown tired of the stalemate, but evidently were not keen on ceding ground to the Djinn representing it. They all turned to me, surrounding my person, hovering half my height from the sandy dunes. Unblinking eyes on me, they loomed with more than a hint of malice. Well then, the Air Djinn started. I believe an explanation is in order. We four represent the elements of nature, the Fire Djinn floated closer, perhaps as a means of intimidation, and one of us is clearly more powerful than the others. Finally, for the first time since I intruded on their debate, I spoke. Is there not balance to be found in nature? The Djinn, all four, laughed. Balance is an illusion, said the Earth Djinn. Nature strives for balance, but never finds it. Rain comes from an imbalance between water and air, volcanoes from earth and fire, sandstorms from air and earth. This is why we bicker endlessly. And also why you must tell us which element is greatest, said the Air Djinn. Now speak. I pondered this for a time, but I could tell my hosts were not keen on waiting. I decided to explain my rationale aloud, though I knew that no matter what answer I came upon, the quartet would no doubt remain unsatisfied. Well, let us look at my situation, I started. Living creatures of Tyria must tread the ground, giving it inherent worth and value. As I expected, said the Earth Djinn, puffing out its chest. This debate will end shortly. But, I continued, much to the Earth Djinn's consternation. Here we stand, among the dunes. I have struggled to tread this ground, for it is pliable and unstable. I am exhausted from my travels, and the sands do little to ease it. I turned to the Air Djinn, who seemed initially pleased with my dismissal of the Earth Djinn. The air, I continued, though it is sweet and cool in the evenings of Crystal Oasis, it is here hot and dry, parching my throat. The Air Djinn squinted wordlessly, clearly disappointed. I turned to the Fire Djinn, and the baking hot sun offers little in the way of comfort. The heat is absorbed by the sand, coursing through the air. Earth, air, and fire conspire to end my life in the dry sands of Alona. The three Djinn I spoke of grumbled and turned expectantly toward the one remaining. There is, however, one element that could ease the discomfort of the other three, I said. The Water Djinn, pleased with my words, raised its arms and manifested a magnificent orb of pure, fresh water. It hovered before me, kept aloft by the Djinn's will. Then consider your discomfort eased, said the Water Djinn. Drink, and let us speak of topics unrelated to the elements for a time. So it was that I came to befriend that Water Djinn, though at the expense of the other three. They were less than enthused to lose their months-long debate and refused to speak with me ever again. Still, the Water Djinn was able to point me to my destination and accompanied me in both company and conversation as far as its disposition would allow. Much time has passed since that fateful encounter, and I have come to rely on this Water Djinn as much as it relies on me. We left the hot sands of Alona for the more temperate Kryta, both in temperature and disposition, but I have many times found myself thinking back to that meeting in the dunes. No matter what the circumstances, I arrive at the same conclusion as to which of the elements should earn humanity's favour. The earth is broad and awe-inspiring, but it cares little for the comfort of its denizens. The air perpetuates life, but does not improve its quality. Fire gives light, but burns hot in the skies of a loner. It is water, and water alone, that provides respite from the elements, and makes life in Tyria's harshest conditions even the slightest bit tolerable. The conversation is quite acceptable as well. So, that is the book, The Four Djinn. There's so much analysis I could do on this, we could probably get a video all in its own. I will be content to leave it at a few key points, however. Number one, that general theme of nature continuously striving to find balance but never quite getting there is extremely representative of Guild Wars 2's broader themes about the Elder Dragon struggle and cycle, which I really enjoy about this. Also, it gives us a really deep insight into these four Djinn, who somehow seem more prominent and powerful even than most regular ones. This Djinn, the water Djinn we see up there, Kadim over there of fire, they seem certainly more capable than others, and I wonder how and when and why they kind of got to that position. But most notably of all, perhaps, is of course that this seems to be the origin story of Miani's relationship with Zomeros. This is where the two met. This is when Zomeros left to go to Kryta. You'll notice the short story is very careful about explaining they went to Kryta but not why, and those other hints about why Zomeros left Ilona still remain as a mystery, let alone his connection to this place, the Mystic Forge. But this is some beautiful backstory that I really, really enjoy. I think it's super well written as well, how they hide the gender of the human in this story until later when it dawns on you that you're actually reading about Miani, is absolutely fantastic. So I wonder whether we will meet the Earth Djinn and the Air Djinn at some point in the future. But that's about what I can get out of it. Really nice little descriptions as well about their forearms and whatnot. And so that is book 1 of 6. Some of them are a little bit shorter, but this is why there's so much cool lore in here, guys. So, buckle in. We got a lot longer to go. First, Kadim's first challenge. What's this contract that Kadim's got us going for? Well, he wants us to take out this boss. As we fight it, there is some general banter between the two Djinn, which I kind of want to show you. However, on my most recent clear, I had game effects volumes really high. But don't feel bad, it's not anything major. What's much more important is what they talk about once the fight is over. And let's watch that here.
Unexpected, but impressive. I'll have to make the next challenge more interesting.
So, you're in Hawk, you staked the Mystic Forge, and you tricked us into fighting for you. Have I missed anything?
Of course, it sounds bad when you say it like that. I needed warriors, and Kadim isn't the waiting type. See you up ahead.
So, I guess we kind of are getting our tour of the Mystic Forge. It's just kind of urgent and adrenaline filled as we are chasing this fire Djinn through his challenges. Glenna getting on her sand jackal there as we can now go behind the barred gates. And we come to this new area, sorting and appraisals, where we learn a little bit more about how the forge actually works.
May I present your second challenge?
Kadim once again using his mysterious golden lamp here to summon creatures. So look, it's a sand shark from within.
That's it? You know what? Fine. Double or nothing.
Wait, what?
If they lose, you can keep them. But if we win, you have to pay me everything I owe you. Deal. Now, all you have to do is find my pet before he decimates your little operation. What? Hey, that isn't fair.
So, Challenge 2, funnily, is not a big encounter, which I really enjoy. We have to find the shark in the gold.
Zomeros, critical failure in ecto-containment. The shark is doing everything.
Right. Change of plans. If that ectoplasm gets free, that's bad for me. Us, bad for us. Let's go!
Good luck?
Yeah. Thanks.
What's that, I hear you ask? Ectoplasm? Why are we dealing with ectoplasm in here? Well, this isn't the Hall of Chains or the Underworld. Well, remember, most Mystic Forge recipes we use for high-end stuff in the game, Zomeros is asking for Ecto. And here's where the wing gets really Charlie in the Chocolate Factory and interesting. The devs really start to explain and identify where various types of items go and come from in the forge. This next selection of rooms is like a labyrinth, and each time you go through a portal, you've got a chance of finding some new sneaky little production production center for a different thing. It's really badass. First, we can speak to Glenna, though, who's got some sneaky dialogue. She says, I can't believe Zomeros. He's got a serious gambling problem. And we can remark, so much for the tour, huh?
I'm actually learning a lot through simple observation. The Priory will just have to settle for that.
We can remark, well, will you be alright here?
I'll be fine. I'll catch up with you once you've dealt with that shark.
So at this point, the encounter sort of begins. There's still a lot of exploration and dialogue we can deal with. Glenna will actually just lay rift forwards after we're done with these rooms. As you're considering where you'd like to go, you may actually notice there's still some Skrit here. And they refer to themselves as Skrit Sorters. Don't bother the Skrit Sorters. Sorting very dangerous, very complex. And we can cut to the chase and just say, where did you say the shark went?
Through Sand Portal! Hurry, before it destroys everything!
How exactly does your sorting work?
You drop things into Forge, Skrit bring them to sorting room. Skrit gives something in return. Simple.
Maybe a little too simple.
Skrit get lots of creative freedom in what to pick for trade.
Yes, we can tell.
So that's a magnificent reveal and observation from Glenna there. The reason why there's so much RNG isn't because of Zomeros, it's because Skrit are randomly throwing things back. A fairly clear revelation, actually, if you think about it. And then lastly, we can ask, how did the Skrit end up in the Mystic Forge? Because it's not like people are throwing Skrit in, right? Right?
Skrit always been here. There is only junk, mountains of junk, forever. Skrit get many shinies to see, many things to take apart. Scratch is grateful, so grateful.
And, well, we don't really get the true answer. Funnily, this raid will tease us a lot about the early nature and history of the Mystic Forge, but not give many hard and fast answers there either. So I love the thought that this Skrit is bang on, that they really were there the whole time. Maybe it was some really intelligent hive of Skrit that ended up building it in the first place. That would be kind of crazy to think about and realize by the end. So there you go, guys. That's the beginning of Encounter 2. Now, we are already 40 minutes into the video, and because of the way I've made it, I've already spent a crazy amount of time on it today. So I'm going to split this up into parts. Join me again for part 2 extremely soon, where we will continue along. We are about to meet two very formidable waterborne assassins that you may have seen hints at if you've been following the release for the early press material, and we will continue along to some truly epic, awesome stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought about the book. Does the love of water above all elements mean the deep sea dragon will be a good guy in the end? Who knows? Give me all your crazy tinfoil hat theories, and I will see you for more story in the Mystic Forge very soon.